Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Our top stories tonight. A 5-day lockdown is imposed on the Kwai Chung building, and its residents will be tested daily. Health authorities probe an outbreak at another restaurant. And protests in France, the latest European epicenter of COVID. Around 2,700 residents of a Kwai Chung public housing block will spend the next 5 days at home after the government locked down their building, hoping to contain an Omicron cluster, which has now grown to 20 patients. But many people had already left the building this morning. Wong has the latest.
In a drastic U-turn, the government sealed off Yat Kwai House in Kwai Chung estate tonight to prevent the fast-growing Omicron cluster from further spreading into the community. Around 2,700 residents will spend the next 5 days at home and undergo daily testing. This is the first time a COVID-induced lockdown is lasting more than 2 days. Last year, authorities cordoned off a densely populated area in Jordan for 48 hours. Center for Health Protection Controller Edwin Cho explained the length of the lockdown was decided after judging the incubation period of Omicron patients. The about turn came one night after authorities conceded that it was incapable of locking down the building, meaning many residents had already left home this morning after testing negative. Health Chief Sophia Chen only urged them to go home as they would normally, but did not say if they will fall foul of the law if they refuse.
Our Hong Kong people are actually quite compliant in terms of, they're going through compulsory testing, going through all these different restriction and testing declaration. They may not be able to go to work. So we really appeal to the employers if they have employees that are actually caught in this this operation, that I hope they would actually treat this situation in a more open and understanding manner, so that they won't deduct people's salary and things like that.
But some residents seem to be making a last-minute escape this afternoon. Other neighbors, meanwhile, decided to stock up on food and essential supplies, even though free meals will be provided. Wong, HKIBC.
Earlier today, long queues formed in Kwai Chung estate as residents of Yat Kwai House waited to be tested. Johanna Chen reports.
Residents of Yat Kwai House in Kwai Chung estate woke up this morning to the sight of cleaners hosing down the street outside. Some took matters into their own hands, disinfecting themselves and wearing an extra raincoat for protection. Throughout the day, long queues formed as people waited to get tested. Authorities said the suspected super spreader in this cluster is the husband of a woman who contracted the Omicron variant after being quarantined in the Silka Seaview Hotel. The man had visited the unlocked rubbish collection rooms in Yat Kwai House last Thursday to salvage items and sell them. Estate cleaners rested, chatted, and ate in those rooms and could have passed the virus to a security guard who tested positive. Cleaners and security guards worked throughout the building and could have easily spread the virus on different floors. The super spreader had also combed the rubbish rooms in Chin Kwai House and Luk Kwai House in the same estate. He sold the salvaged items on Pei Ho Street, Tainan Street, Keelung Street, and Kwai Lun Street in Sham Shui Po. Shop owners nearby said they were concerned, as he often showed up at night without wearing a mask. Johanna Chan, HKIBC.
Health authorities are investigating a COVID outbreak at another restaurant as various clusters continue to expand. There's also concern over how a construction worker listed as preliminary positive may have been infected. Here's Johanna Chen again.
Health authorities are trying to find out how a 40-year-old construction worker who tested preliminary positive might have contracted the virus. The man, who lives at 35 Nam Chung Street in Sham Shui Po, went to hospital yesterday after developing a fever. His home is in an area where an earlier patient sold goods salvaged from rubbish bins. The construction worker had worked at a site in Chengshan Estate in Chunwan and at the Tin Shui Wai swimming pool site. His close contacts and colleagues will be quarantined. A 2-year-old toddler who lives on the 14th floor of Yin Kwai House in Kwai Chung was also declared preliminary positive after being taken to hospital with a fever. The child is a neighbor of a cleaner who works in nearby Yat Kwai House, where 20 people have come down with COVID or are suspected cases. Staff of Dragon Place in Aberdeen, meanwhile, must get tested, while the restaurant will close for 2 weeks after a diner was infected. He had his meal at around the same time as a previous case, but investigations are continuing because the two were not seen interacting.
We've seen the floor plan of the restaurant and know that the 2 tables where the 2 cases seated, they are quite far apart. From what we understand from the 2 cases, they left the table and went to the toilet. Other than that, they may not have face-to-face contact during that period.
Hong Kong had 24 COVID cases today, 18 of them local. 4 of the locally transmitted infections were linked to the Little Boss pet store and carried the L452R variant. Johanna Chan, HKIBC.
The government has been urged to reconsider its zero COVID policy as the outbreak has entered a new phase. In a Facebook post, the former chief executive of the hospital authority, Leung Pak-yin, said it would be difficult and unrealistic to continue the policy as there are community clusters all over the city. He suggested a rigorous vaccine bubble plan to encourage more people to get vaccinated and avoid a collapse of the medical system. Leung also recommended the reopening of public venues closed under the latest round of restrictions. Beijing is on heightened alert as it battles 2 COVID variants 2 weeks ahead of the Winter Olympics. The capital added 7 cases today on top of 5 recorded yesterday, taking the tally in the latest outbreak to 18. 5 Omicron patients in Haidian district were linked to the delivery of international mail, while Kwai imported goods triggered a Delta cluster. In a bid to contain the virus, only selected members of the public will be invited for the torch relay of the games. Overall, the mainland logged 23 new local cases yesterday, dropping from 43 on Wednesday. 8 were in Tianjin and 4 in Guangdong. Overseas, there is a glimmer of hope for an end to the Omicron crisis in some countries, with experts saying Australia's outbreak may have peaked while cases fell sharply in Africa. But some European governments rolled out strict measures to clamp down on surging caseloads. Dozens of teachers and parents rallied outside a university in central Paris to protest against new testing protocols. In a bid to quash the fast-spreading Omicron variant, children who test positive have to stay home for up to 10 days. Their classmates will have to take 3 COVID tests in 4 days, causing long lines to form outside pharmacies. Many parents struggle to get vaccination appointments for their children. Facing calls for a nationwide strike, the authorities promised to hire 3,000 substitute teachers to alleviate the manpower crunch induced by isolation. France is at the epicenter of Europe's current surge, with new cases topping 400,000 in the past 3 days. But the authorities said the Omicron-propelled 5th wave is showing signs of waning, even as they press for vaccine passports. Austria went a step further as lawmakers overwhelmingly approved a vaccine mandate, the first of its kind in Europe. All adults will need to get their jabs except those including pregnant women who are exempted. People who can't produce proof of vaccination will be fined as much as $680 the first time, after which the fines get heftier. Similar measures are under consideration in Germany, which shattered another record to add 140,000 patients. Restaurants and bars will close early in Tokyo and other areas across Japan amid growing costs to live with the virus. Australia, which was ravaged by Omicron since last month, saw new cases and hospitalizations continue to decline. Epidemiologists believe that infections from the latest wave appear to have peaked. New cases dropped 20% in Africa, a significant decline since Omicron was reported in South Africa in November. But the World Health Organization said the continent's vaccination coverage has to be boosted to bring an end to the pandemic. And coming up after the break. A suspected human trafficker is arrested after 4 Indian nationals freeze to death in Canada. And a 19-year-old becomes the youngest woman to fly solo around the world.